Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the SDR podcast. And today I'm with Will Falkenborg for round 2. If you didn't listen to the episode with Will, you can listen to the first episode. Today will be round 2 with him, and we are going to answer questions from the audience because I think we had a lot of interesting questions. I think a podcast about sales, we need to give more context, and we had really interesting questions. So because for to mention, so last week on LinkedIn, I made a post about the first episode with Will, and we got like maybe 20, 25 questions from people on LinkedIn. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. Long time no talk.
There is questions on my side I wanted to ask you also because we didn't talk about that last time. So what's your ICP at HG Insights actually?
So our ICP is typically any B2B SaaS org. We have multiple different industry and vertical focuses. For me in particular, I'm focused on B2B orgs in cybersecurity, anywhere from smaller companies, 50 to 100 million in ARR, all the way to playing with the big boys at 5 billion in ARR. In terms of buying personas in those ICPs, we're typically looking at marketing ops and sales ops and influence from sales, marketing, and revenue leadership within our ICP.
So you have different size of companies actually, and also you have a lot of buyer personas to go after. Something we didn't talk about. So we talk about your achievement and your 530% that you made in September, for example. But what's your target actually? Your quota, monthly quota?
Our monthly quota is 100 points per month. And that is based off of meetings held. And the points essentially aligned to each meeting is based off of seniority. And so let's say we're getting 8 points for a director of marketing. I'm going to have to book 10 or I'm going to have to book like 12 and some change to get there. But if we're booked 10 points for a VP, it's essentially 10 meetings per month held.
Okay. So you did basically 530%.
Yes.
Point. Yeah, actually. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's here it's me talking about from the SDR leadership perspective is I like this way of doing things because it's how do you say that? Reward the efforts on going after the right titles, the quality of the titles. Because generally, what I've seen in previous companies I work for, companies I know, it's just based on the meeting if it's qualified, not qualified, but if they perform. But it's not based on, for example, the ICP, the buyer persona who are on the call, who is on the call. Okay, so now let's start with the question that we had on the email post from last week. So we were talking about that you are making 160 calls per day on average. So the first question we had was from Mohammed Saab, RevOps at Grow Automated. So he asked, what tools do you use? Do you actually use? Do you use multiple dialing add-ons?
Great question. So in terms of the tools I'm using, I'm just using Outreach. I don't sequence. I don't use like call sequences where you can go like start your sequence and start going tasks over and over again. I typically just have a sales nav list of, a sales org and a marketing org within a company, and I just go down the list and I copy and paste numbers in Outreach. And it is as grueling and boring as you think it is. But the suspense of waiting for them to pick up the phone is what makes it special. And so in terms of tools, I'm just using Outreach to call.
Okay. How do you keep track of, for example, because I imagine you don't call your prospect once also, it's you might call them a few times, but how do you keep track of that?
Yeah, so I actually never kept track of them until lately. I started putting like sales nav notes for the prospects of just upping the number of how many times I've called them. As an example of that, I cold called the VP of sales who saw a video of me in a hot dog costume that I sent him. I finally booked him in, but it took 29 dials to actually get him. And so I will keep track of that on SalesNav now, but it is a lot of manual changing, and so a lot of the times I just won't do it, and I'll just keep calling them until either, 1, I realize it's the wrong number, 2, I booked the demo, or 3, they, like, threaten to hunt me down, and I don't know. But usually it's one of the options there.
Yeah. And then, because you mentioned this VP of sales, you call him like 29 times. I know generally I have pushback from this calling more than 5 or 6 times. For example, one specific numbers. Did this VP of sales were annoyed when you call him actually when you pick up the phone? Or
No, I mean, he gave me good feedback on my persistence. I'm annoyingly persistent in a good way, quote unquote. And then, see, the thing is though, I'm not calling from the same number. Like I have 3 different numbers I call from. And so I guess that's a point I should make is I don't call 29 times from the same number. If somebody called me 20 times from the same number, I'd block it. But I'm switching up the number. If I'm not getting pickups, like, within an account, I'll just switch the number with like, I'll ask our RevOps team for a new number, and I'll just call through that account again for, like, another few weeks, and then I just keep switching it up. Haven't used local dial yet, something I'd like to do, but I just keep switching up between really hope my prospects are not watching this, but a 408, 617 in Boston, and I have a 310.
something I know, it's not. I think it's more for in the US. There is not a law, but I think in the US specifically now you have a way to see the number if it's like reported as spam. And that's something I know for cold calling is super important. For me specifically, for where I'm living, I have an app to detect if the number is a spam because there is like people, maybe not cold callers, but you have like call centers calling you, and generally they're already reported as uh, spam. So something I know is super interesting is to try also in the country you are living, calling you with number you're calling to see if it's the case with your phone number.
Yeah, and so the way I mitigate that risk is, let's say I'm in the office or I'm working remotely, I'll ask one of the SDRs, that I work pretty closely with. I'll be like, "Hey, can I just test my number on you?" Anytime I feel like my pickup rate is going low, I just test all my numbers maybe about once a week, and then from there, I mean, to be fair, all my 3 numbers haven't been marked as spam in, like, over a month, so I haven't really had that issue, but I keep testing it because you don't wanna go for weeks without getting pickups.
Yeah, because I know for cold email, that's the main issue generally why people are maybe sending less email. And I know that's why you you stopped using emails. But I know with calls, it's there is similar spam features also now. So I think that's a good thing. So okay, so let's move to the next question. So because you are making 160 dials per day, I think another question was around data tools. So that was a question from Robert Ackerel, SDR Data Guard. He was asking, what data tools do you use to pull so many mobiles?
And so the world of boxing, one of the most favorite moves is like a 1-2 combo. And so we replicate that boxing move with Lusha, and Rocket Reach. So we have Lusha credits across the board, and then we'll have an ops team who, will essentially put a contact info request, and our ops team will go pull their number on Rocket Reach. From there, I keep an eye out on LinkedIn. Every time I connect with a person, I check to see if their number surfaces, and then I'll add it to their my sales nav notes. Or let's say I happen to send them an email, I'll just see if it was an automatic reply, and I'll just take note of that. So very simple, like nothing fancy, just Lusha Rocket Reach 1-2 combo.
Nice. And then we had also another question, still talking about the 160 dice from Jonathan Sanchez Martin at Newell. He was asking, do you have a bot calling for you?
I don't, but if anyone knows of a bot, I am more than willing to discuss that and put my manager on a meeting if you hit me up on LinkedIn.
Um, then let's talk about uh, Quota and research time because we had like some question around new Quota. So I already started to talk about that, but we had like a question from Emmanuel Carpenter, director of worldwide biz dev at Solo.io. So he was asking if your Quota is based on meetings, pipeline, or something else.
Yeah, just meeting sat. Very simple, straight to the point. Sometimes a manager can get you to the VP if they're a champ. So our SDR leaders tend to incentivize just meeting sat.
And then another question. This question actually, we have a lot of people asking about this question, but I'm going to read the one from Chad Baker. So he's an SDR at Leeds, sorry. So he was asking, do you really spend hours researching your prospects?
I think you're referring to the phone assassin, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's the phone assassin.
Okay. So, all right, Chad. So I do answer is no. I don't spend hours researching my prospects. Um, a lot of leaders live their days on a quarterly basis. It could be a yearly basis, depending on their seniority. A lot of SDRs will reach out on a prospect basis to specific personas, but I live my life within an account, right? And so it's my job to know the industry very well to the extent where I can make cybersecurity jokes. It's also my job to know that account well. And once you've done the research on their peers, you know it's important to them because a lot of companies are essentially fighting for the same market share. And so typically an angle for company X will work for company Y, but you just have to tailor it very slightly. And so I already know what's important to them, typically speaking, because I've put in all of that research in the year that I've been in SCR. Um, but yeah, I don't spend hours researching my prospects.
So I think here specifically for the hours of research that may be misleading on my side because on the post I was mentioning that, but because on the first interview, the recording we did together, we are talking about your research. And I think the way you are doing it's not based on the prospect, but it's more based on the account. And so that's something you can scale. It's easier to scale, I think, if you compare, because if you are doing hours of research for each prospect, maybe it's not scalable with the volume you have. So exactly. And something else also you mentioned in the first conversation was you are using a lot the words of the company, for example, that's obviously it shows that you've done your research to different individuals inside the account, not just one person specifically. Okay. Um, then we had another question from Jason. It's a digital marketing consultant. So he was saying 160 average daily calls, all heavily research. Do you cold code in your sleep? Actually.
The answer to that is yes. I've had I think if you do something enough, you begin to dream about it. I've had countless dreams, at least 3 to 4 times a night of cold calling or answering objections or meeting my prospects in the grocery store at Trader Joe's, which is just a wild experience pitching someone at a Trader Joe's in your dream. And so in my mind, yes, in reality, no. One thing I'd like to know is like there's a lot of skepticism around making 160 dials a day. I'm not even the top dialer at HG. We have an extremely heavy cold calling culture. And a colleague of mine that I'll speak about a little bit later, his name's Fabian. He calls way more than I do. I mean, in fact, one of our other SDRs, his name's Nathan, Nathan Castro, his dial record's over 1,000 a week. So he was clearing over 200. Yeah. And so the more of that big cold calling culture, and a lot of people are asking me how to make 160 dials a day, and it's important to understand the landscape that I have played in for that month of September. I mentioned there's an SDR named Fabian. He's an absolute killer. Like we push each other in competition and also help each other in terms of we're trying to make more dials than each other every day. We're also evaluating each other's cold calling strategy and our email strategy to improve each other's competition to spin the flywheel for the both of us. Um, and so, like, I mean, when you go to toe like that, everything you do is aligned to not losing to that person. So it's loss aversion over increasing pleasure, right? And so essentially waking up every morning knowing that I'm going to battle with this person, but I'm also helping them. And so that's essentially where it stems from.
Don't remember. I think it's coming later on the question, but I think that's another question that we had a lot from people on the post. What they were asking about how you manage your day because a lot of people were skeptical about making 160 dials per day. Um, Actually, I was starting to reply to some comments on this, and then I saw that you already replied the way you're scheduling your day. But for me, because my understanding, and I know that's my fault here, maybe on the first episode we didn't talk about your day to day. But for me, if you just call and you do some research on some accounts, if you do 5 hours of cold calls, 32 calls per hour, it's 160 calls per day, basically. But that's 5 hours of cold callings. I know I already saw your schedule, so I know that's not the way you are doing it. But because if someone is just cold calling like you, I think maybe the assumption to have people are you are just working 8 hours per day, for example.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So, um, I guess the assumption there is that I am working 8 hours a day, which is not the case. I typically like I'm working a little bit less now because I'm having to help out a lot more with our baby because my wife's like getting close to the finish line with the next one. And but in terms of the September and all the months before that, when I was hitting 300 and 400%, my workday would typically start at around 4:30 to 5 when I wake up. If I'm working in the office, I drive to the office and I'm dialing by 5:30 to 6, essentially dialing until 9:45. So that's 3 hours and 45 minutes there. Subtract 15 for bathroom breaks. From there, 9:45 to 12, I'm doing a little bit of admin, following up on, say, I had a great conversation, but they're adamant on me sending them an email, following up on those and calling people I followed up with before. When the clock strikes 12, I do not work. My only prioritization of time is on ping pong at that moment. Um, and I play ping pong from 12 to 1, and then I'm back on the horn. Main goal after 1 o'clock is saving money on my heating expense at home by keeping the dialer hot. And so I guess if you add up the hours, we're looking at like 6 to 7 in terms of cold calling.
Per day. Okay, 6 or 7.
Yeah,
So
that was in
yeah.
September. Not
Yeah.
I'm a little bit I've dialed it down a little bit now because in September, my main goal is building enough pipeline to close in Q4. Now that I'm not gonna be an SDR January, my goal is to get all of that pipeline across the finish line and build net new ops for Q1.
So what did you say? You are not an is there anymore in Q1? That's what you said?
Well, yeah, it's I mean, yeah.
Are you
We'll see.
getting promoted? Oh,
Yeah, I got a few things on the table.
I feel
I'll,
okay.
yeah, I'll let you I'll let you know.
Sounds good. Yeah, keep us updated on that. Now let's focus more on because we had like a really interesting question from Paul Rufus. He's a manager of business development at NetSuite. So he's curious about your conversion rate and the quality of the meetings you are booking.
Yeah, and when you say conversion rates, should I assume conversion rates of like a dial to a demo or conversion rate of demo to close?
I think yeah, let's talk about a dive to a demo because yeah, let's focus on that. Yeah.
Great. And so, I mean, I could see where he's coming from, especially like calling from NetSuite. Like that is a pretty valid concern. I mentioned before that our buyers are in marketing and sales, which are sales ops, which are influenced by marketing and sales leaders. If you look at, let's say, conversion rates from dials to demos, that's typically dependent on pickup rate and conversion rates. The people I'm calling is a fundamentally different landscape than NetSuite, right? If I'm calling go-to-market personas, a lot of sales leaders, like a VP of sales, like, oh, I could be a customer calling them. I could be that last call before a deal goes over the line. Um, However, it's a redheaded kid with a baby trying to put his fingers in his mouth who's trying to get him a promotion, essentially. And so because of that, my pickup rates are a lot higher, which lead to my conversion rate. Do I know my conversion rate? No, I just focus on booking demos. And so in terms of the quality of the meetings, because we're booking people that feel go-to-market pains, they are getting us referral into the ops folks who would be taking on something like HG. In terms of quality of the meetings, like we're getting great progress in most of the meetings I'm booking. However, it's just macroeconomic climate is leading to a lot of deal slip and need to multi-thread.
And also, the quality of a meeting depends on what you are looking for because if you're booking with the right ICP or the right buyer persona, then like you're mentioning about the climate, for the economic crisis we have right now, it's obviously if the outcome of the meeting will be can be different. And I know right now that sales cycles are longer, for example, but if you are booking with the right ICP or the right buyer persona, that's I think super important, especially for outbound. Actually, do you build your account list? Of I imagine with the size of HG you don't, but I imagine they give you a list of accounts that you are working.
Yeah, and
You have
so we work with our AEs, on terms of their accounts, and so we use our own internal scoring metrics to build essentially like propensity lists of which accounts we should be spending time on, which ones we shouldn't. Based off of that, AE and SDR relationship is extremely important. Um, in those accounts, what we'll do is we'll go and strategize who do we need to be getting on, which region should we be focusing on, and who's actually going to contribute and get this across the line.
Yeah, which is makes sense. So that's why you're focusing more on booking meetings because the quality of the account is already checked. Because I know and my previous work, also sometimes we have this, so you still have like to do some research about the quality of the account. So you said, yeah, let's talk about what's your pickup rate actually? Pickup rate, sorry. Do you have it? Or I was just curious. So it's just to know because I know we have this question later in the last question. So I know someone was talking about your conversion rate based on the number of dials you're making per month and the number of meetings you are booking. Uh, and if I reply to the person on LinkedIn, but we are going to talk about it here.
So according to Salesforce, I have a 6.4% connection rate, but that's assuming all of my prospects in outreach are assigned to a lead in Salesforce. So I honestly don't know my numbers. I think one of the things I stressed in our first interview was like, hey, like it depends on how many conversations I'm having a day. If I'm not, I change my number. And then I just look to evaluate two parts of my outbound, if my conversion rate is low.
yeah, and I remember also you were saying that you are expecting a certain amount of meetings booked per week, and if it's below your normal number, that's when you start digging what's happening. So, okay. Then we had a question from Conrad Kleinhorst, Global VP and GM at Neobrain. So he was looking for clarification on numbers and how they align with an 8-hour workday, including research. So he mentioned he's a bit confused about the numbers he was trying to, and he's not trying to expose something here, just generally curious. And yeah, so we are talking about the 160 dials per day on average at a net hours workday. It's a dial every 3 minutes. If you add hours of research for your prospect into the mix, that was because that when it becomes more complicated. He loved the mirroring and limiting channels approach. So can also be sequenced 1 month cold calling, 1 month emailing to be experting in each, but focus on one and being in first stage for a given time. But in general, I just would like to understand the above inconsistencies that may not be one, but simply are not clear to me. Could you elaborate?
Yeah. I think the inconsistency is in the assumption, right? He's assuming that I'm doing hours of research every day, and in reality, I'm not. Like, I know my accounts. I'm very intimate with my accounts because I'm building out the lists, and I've done research on their competitors, know what they're doing. The only research that I'm doing on a day to day is like I'll skim through their website, see if I missed anything, or I'll just type in and company space news and see if anything's come up that I can introduce on the phone or a LinkedIn message.
Okay. And actually, if maybe because you said that you already done the research on the account, so when you contact I imagine they are not net new because generally someone else maybe worked through it from the past. So how much time do you spend, for example, with a net new account under your territory?
Okay, great. And so by net new, you mean account that nobody's touched before, right?
Let's say that yeah, let's say no one touched it in the past.
Yeah. So if it's a net new account in my territory, specifically in cybersecurity, I'll see what sector of cybersecurity they're in because it's an extremely diverse like atmosphere. And so if I'm looking at what cog in the ecosystem they play in, do I know their competitors? Yes or no. If not, I'll go listen to like their competitors' calls in Gong if we've spoken with them. If not there, then I'll check earnings, news, um, website, and then from there, I can typically get an understanding of who they sell to, how they're portrayed, and then I can weave that messaging, into my own. And so if it is a net new, like, I don't think it should be taking you that long because reading you can skim through an earnings if you'd like. I personally like reading through it myself because it's just fun. But if you are doing that, I think maybe an hour, hour and a half maximum if it's like a high priority account for you.
I think you are pretty efficient into your process about the research because you try to be more focused on understanding the account and doing the research once. So
Yeah. And I was gonna say one thing I'd like to note about that is, let's say you're going on an ultra marathon through the desert, right? If you don't know where you're going, if you don't have a compass, you're gonna look up and realize that you're nowhere. Same thing happens when you're cold calling without research. And so I've accumulated industry knowledge in cybersecurity and articulated how my product fixes pains for the go to market personas I'm reaching out to in the context of their industry niche. Like I mentioned, at first, there's a lot of research, but when you start putting in the time to understand that, your angles will resonate. And then it pays off not just then, but in the future because you already first know how to research and two, understand the research you've done before.
and then we had another comment from Bradley Franks, head of sales at Applied, and same comment actually from Michael Walker, to CEO at the AI agency. They were talking about sustainability and potential burnout. So one question was, anyone doing $160 per day in hours of research is bound for burnout. Would love to see your 3 months prior and 3 months following the 520% months. Nothing but love and respect for an amazing achievement, but I'm afraid it's not sustainable. Uh, that or the quota is far too low.
Yeah. So I would agree in terms of that level of quota attainment or dials every single day is not sustainable. I'm not going to be middle December making 160 dials to people who are skiing in the Alps. It doesn't make sense. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. However, I mentioned that I was going toe to toe with another SDR and we're pushing each other to new heights. Anytime I use the bathroom and he made an extra 5 dials, I came back having that extra 5 dials in my head saying, I need to double that. I need to make up for the lost time that I had because this person was making more dials than me. And so extraordinary metrics happen. Um, and then because of that competition. So looking at the quota, I think he asked like 3 months before, something like that. Um, in April, I think April, May, and June, it was like 330, 360, 370 approximately. I took 2 weeks off in July, so I hit 168%, and then 403 for August, and then the rest is history.
And let's talk about for the 12 months period also. So were you working the same amount also of hours that you are doing in September?
Like, right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I am not, and so because I've built this tremendous amount of pipeline, I'm trying to get it across the line. My goal is just quality outreach and multi-threading into those accounts. A lot of the times you can't get like a VP of RevOps on the phone just because everyone's calling them. And so I need to synthesize that information and take it to new stakeholders. The quota doesn't really matter to me at this point. It's more of how many closed ones can I get before I'm not in my position. And so my typical workday now, being a November SCR with a baby coming in a couple months, is looking like I'll wake up in the morning. I'll just check LinkedIn, drink some coffee, and go for like a 30-45 minute walk. With I like for example, this morning I went with my 9-month-old Billy. Then after that, it's EMEA dials. It's literally the same schedule. It's just an hour or two later. So I'm not going as hard just because I have to help out a little bit more, but it is the same schedule. I'm multi-threading. I'm still loving dialing. It's just there's certain months of the year where you really need to capitalize, and so you can spend other months closing.
Then I was going to read another comment from, it was Clint Hinker, Enterprise AI at Service Channel, but it's about the research. So we already talked about it a few times. So we're not going to spend more time on this one. But then we had a question actually from Alexis Boucher, sales ops at Avisio. So he was saying, not sure that highlighting this kind of KPIs is a good thing. Qualitative prospecting is preparation, which was certainly done in August in this case. Performance must be repres- replicable. Sorry, such high velocity is not sustainable over time. Set market standards are too high for what most prefer are able to deliver. So I know we already started to talk about this a few times here, but here specifically already replied on the LinkedIn post. But for example, here on, and that's what also created this show actually, is to have obviously if I'm talking with top performers like you, actually, Will. And I know right now you are saying that not you are not doing this every month. But obviously for me specifically, I've never seen someone doing 530% fully ramped because generally what you see is an SDR getting 400% in month one or month two. So obviously in month one or month two, I think it's maybe easier because generally your quota is lower. But when you have someone who is fully ramped, I think it's really impressive because I don't know a lot of people who've done that already. So
Yeah. No, I totally get where he's coming from. I think there was a couple points I agreed with there. Um, I think he mentioned about highlighting these kind of KPIs being unhealthy. Um, I mean, that is one I disagree with because I don't see why you discount somebody's work for them going above and beyond and trying to learn and have fun with it every day. I think the current market KPIs are a lot lower than they should be. I'm not saying my commission is too high. I personally think our commission should be higher because I think it would be more fun for a lot of people. I know a lot of companies in their job postings, they're saying like, "Hey, we should be only making like 40 to 60 dials, like as the expectation." But I think the expectation should be going above and beyond. Let's say when somebody's hiring an SDR like yourself, they're looking for an SDR to do the job and go above and beyond, as opposed to an SDR candidate just hitting LinkedIn Easy Apply. I think those who go above and beyond should be rewarded for it, and they should spend their lives doing that because, as Chris Ritson says, once an SDR, you're always an SDR. I think those who love to do it will continue to do it, and I think his comment is essentially saying the same, putting like an ultra marathon runner down for doing what he loves when people run marathons all the time.
so I think what I've seen in the past also working with a lot of different SDRs, uh, you have people who are really top performers and they want to always exceed and they do more than what they're supposed to do because I think like you were saying earlier, so I think there is seasons in our lives also that where you can do it. And that's why when you can do it because I know for right now, if you are expecting your second baby, for example, but at some point you won't be able to do it because you need to spend time with your family. So you will be more focused on maybe lower numbers, but because also your family is important, I think. And I think there is season in life. So right now you're in season where you are really, really expecting the no, how do you say it? Overcoming the expectation. Obviously, you could do less, but that's your focus right now. Um, and I know some people that are focused on, yeah, they love the role, but they are happy with their performance, and I think that's fine. Also, I know it's something you won't be doing every month, but do you recommend this? For example, the month you had in September, for any SDRs who want to do this, actually.
Yeah. And in terms of what I would recommend, there's two things here. The first one is, finding someone either you started with or doing slightly better than you or doing instrumentally better than you. Find that person and go toe to toe with them. Um, Look at their activity metrics, add 20%, add 50%, hit that number, and constantly do that. Because if you're going toe to toe to someone, you're going to spend that time trying to beat them. They're going to be trying to beat you because they know you're trying to beat them. People do not like to lose. And spend the time to make that person better because they're only going to make you better. The second point here is I think every SDR, obviously depending on what field you're playing in, I think every SDR should be making like 100 dials a day, um, at first, at least. Unless, like, obviously, there's SDRs who are existing customers, et cetera. Probably shouldn't be doing that. The reason I say SDR should be making 100 in dials a day is because you get a lot of growth from it. The more swings you have at bat give you the more opportunities to hit home run and improve your swing. Before I started SDRing, I read a book, I think I've mentioned this before, called Principles by Ray Dalio. One thing that really stuck out to me, and I even used this book in my interview process at HG, was that growth ultimately looks like this, right? It starts with being extremely audacious and like doing as much as you can in turn, whether that can be writing cold emails, sending videos, making dials, um, and then you want to fail flat on your face. You want to make mistakes. If you go into it understanding like, hey, I'm going to make as many mistakes I can, your growth is going to start to bend down, and then you're going to learn from those mistakes and stop making them, and that brings you back up to making as many dials as you can again. And so, one thing I would impress on every SDR is it's again, this isn't from a book called Principles, but it's being audacious with your goals, um, not being afraid to make mistakes, taking those mistakes and not repeating them, and then going right back to stage one of being audacious again. And so, would I recommend making 160 dials, 200 dials a day? I mean, if you've got 3 kids in the family, no, I don't recommend it. But if you have the time and you actually want to put and create a solid foundation for your future, and like whether it's tech sales, or in the go-to-market atmosphere, then I would recommend $100 a day. You don't need to make 150, 160. You just need to do what you can in terms of your activity metrics to get better.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to end the episode today. And just want to tell to also the audience today, to the listeners, I know for example, on the first day conversation, we should have done more, focus more also on the context, the time you're spending on your day, on your research, also stuff like that. So on the next episode, I'm going to do this to give more context around you, for example, for Will specifically. So your day to day, so how much time you're spending, for example. So we understand that you are not you are working more than 8 hours, for example.
Yeah, slightly more.
Yeah. So, Will, thanks again for being on the show, and for everyone listening, I see you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me, mate.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So for Spotify, to leave a review, what you can do is you can use your phone, then go on the Spotify app, then you go to the SDR game page, and then at the top of the page, you can leave a review. It's a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode, obviously. And then if you are listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, feel free also to leave a review on your app. Thanks for listening, and I see you on the next episode.